Hello and welcome to Second Wind, the show where I get to talk about PlayStation 2 games that I love. This episode I'm particularly excited as I get to rave about one of my all-time favourites. This episode is coming out in conjunction with Broken Age, the new Tim Schafer-led Double Fine game. Originally I really wanted to do Grim Fandango, but the game's just a little bit too old. It came out in, what, 98, 2000, something like that. It's on PC, it would be hard to capture footage, so there's plenty of reasons I couldn't do it. So instead, we're going to do the first game Tim Schafer did after leaving LucasArts, which is also the first Double Fine game. We're doing Psychonauts. I can't begin to talk about how much I love Psychonauts. If you haven't played it before, I hope you pick it up after watching this. It is probably the least recognised game in the Double Fine catalogue. Tim Schafer is a man who is gifted when it comes to dialogue. He's sleek, sharp, he's funny. This is the #1 reason I love Grim Fandango so much, and there is so much of Grim Fandango that managed to trickle down into Psychonauts. The reason Psychonauts remains such a good game, the reason it's still relevant, is because of this. Before Tim Schafer, characters didn't really stand out in my opinion. So many other PS2 games and other games from this era had characters who were bland or unoriginal or really just weren't that engaging. You didn't fall in love with them, you didn't care what happened to them. This goes for the guy in GTA 3, Max Payne, and plenty of others from the era. They're boring and they're two-dimensional. Whereas somehow these fantastical cartoon creations had way more depth to them. In some ironic fashion, they were often actually two-dimensional, and yet they felt more real in many ways than these supposedly realistic characters. And I think that alone is where Psychonauts stakes its claim. The story is mad. It's about a young boy called Raz who has to enter people's minds to save a psychic summer camp from an evil mastermind. It may be reminiscent of a Tim Burton movie, but the way the game tackles that story is where it shines. Learning a lot from those LucasArts games, Psychonauts concentrates on dialogue and characters to carry the weight of the story. As a platformer, it is definitely showing its age, but the game always comes back down to that brilliant dialogue and humour. It may be silly, but it's original and inspired, and at times it will actually make you lol.
Freedom!
Like
Freedom!
a lol.
Freedom!
The majority of the game takes place in the minds of the various inhabitants of the summer camp. One of the ingenious parts of this is that every character's mind is different, so because of that, every level can be different, and some of them are outlandish and unique. Some might be rigidly structured, some might be wild fantasy rides, and some are just plain ridiculous. When Raz is in these characters' minds, he's ridding them of their emotional baggage and helping them overcome their fears. Whilst in their mind though, the psyche of the host will attack Raz by creating censors who will try and drive him from their mind. It's worth noting that this game did this 5 years before the movie that had the same idea. I mentioned earlier that a lot of wit and a lot of the soul of Grim Fandango was inherited by Psychonauts. And this is largely due to the talent. Not only was the game written and designed by Schafer, but the art and design crew was partly made up of ex-LucasArts, ex-Grim Fandango staffers. The apple didn't fall far from the tree in that respect, and for that this reviewer is grateful. Originally slated for an exclusive Xbox release, this was when Xbox engendered that whole Dreamcast 2 ethos. Microsoft did a big 180 on their mentality of pushing original and daring creator-owned IP, and so began the age of sequels, safe bets, and watered-down content. Despite high critical acclaim for being funnier, more original, and livelier than its contemporaries, that sine wave of publisher enthusiasm would plague Double Fine and is responsible for the low retail successes and relative obscurity of both Psychonauts and its successor, Brutal Legend. Now this is a discussion for another time, but Psychonauts is a perfect example of a brilliant game that didn't do well because it isn't a sequel to a bankable franchise. It fell foul of publisher disinterest because nobody would trust a game that was new, or left field, or even a little bit daring. This is the biggest bugbear affecting our industry right now, and one which hopefully the indie scene is going to conquer. And that, fittingly, is a motion spearheaded by Broken Age. In 2011, Double Fine released an updated version of the game on Windows and OS X via Steam. This version includes achievements and cloud saving, and there's even a smart little iOS companion app released alongside. You can also grab it DRM free from GOG.com or from the Xbox Originals download service for Xbox 360. Don't ask me how that works for Xbox One, I have no idea. There's no way to play this on current Sony platforms, so you'll probably need to get a copy of the PS2 game. But the good news is, Nordic Games recently announced that they're going to be publishing and distributing retail copies of Psychonauts this year on a disc. So now is the perfect time to add this mind-blowing bombshell to your collection of games. As always, if you liked the video, then give us a little thumbs up. Why don't you hit that subscribe button while you're at it? I will be here again in a few weeks' time talking about another old game from my extensive collection of PlayStation 2 games that I would like to talk about. Come along, spend a couple of minutes with me and let me rant and let me rave about things that I love.
I think you've got the muscles of a little girl too.